Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Wednesday night Bible study. Or if this is your first time joining us, welcome to our Wednesday night Bible study. We are so glad you are here. God bless each and every one of you, and we love you. The last time you saw me, we talked about this crash course into Christianity that God gave me, something that I wish I had when I was first starting out on my Christian journey, or if you have been walking with the Lord a long time, this is also a great refresher. And basically, it's just some things that would be beneficial for you to know once you're just starting out on your Christian journey. Last week, we talked about the devil's agenda, his strategy, and his tactics, and how we can counter those tactics and able to fight or to be able to, stand against the devil. And we remember that if we be able to stand against the devil, he'll flee from us, and that not us fleeing from him. So tonight, I just wanted to kind of take a pause. God is doing some wonderful things in the lives of his people. He is fulfilling his promises. He is being faithful to his word. And as he is being faithful in his words and his promises, we are called to our faithfulness. And I just wanted to just take a pause tonight and just kind of give you what God gave me about what the posture of your heart should be, even when you are in a season of promise. Just because you are in promise does not mean this is the time to slack or get, kind of get slowful. This is not that time. This is the time to continue in our prayer, our persistence, and our character or our poise, and being in God, exactly who God created each and every one of us to be. So our scripture tonight is coming from Luke, the 12th chapter, the 42nd verse through the 49th verse. And I am reading from the King James Version tonight. So I'm going to give you just a second to get that together, and we're going to get started. I don't know about anybody else, but I had a bad habit of only going to God when something was wrong or when I needed something. So God ain't hear from me until something was popping off, and I'm like, Lord Jesus, help me. And I'd be crying, and he'll come through. And once he come through, he wouldn't hear from me no more until I needed something else. And that is not the way that we should treat God. How would you feel if, you only heard from somebody when they needed something or they wanted something, and when they got what they wanted or got what they needed, they were nowhere to be found. They didn't call you, contact you again until they needed something else. So that we shouldn't treat God that way, because we wouldn't want anybody treating us that way. But God is faithful, even when we're not, but we should be. But God is faithful in his promises. So what should our faithfulness should look like, even in the posture of our heart while we are in a season of promise? So Luke, the 12th chapter, the 42nd verse through the 49th verse reads, "And the Lord said, who then is that faithful and wise steward, whom his Lord shall make ruler over his household, to give them their portion of meat in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Of a truth I say unto you, that he will make him ruler over all that he hath. But, and if that servant say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to beat the men servants and maidens, and to eat and drink and to be drunken, the Lord of that servant will come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour when he is not aware, and will cut him in sunder, and will appoint him his portion with the unbelievers. And that servant which knew his Lord's will, and prepared not himself, neither did according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. But he that knew not, and did commit things worthy of stripes, shall be beaten with few stripes. For unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required. And to whom men have committed much of him, they will ask the more." May God add a blessing to the reading of his word, and that is our scripture for tonight. And this is basically telling us that God is going to do exactly what he said he's going to do. He's going to give us his promises. He's going to do what he said he was going to do. He was going to release the things that he said he was going to release in our life, whether that be healing, whether that be deliverance, whether that be financial freedom, whether that be freedom in your mind, healing your mind, binding suicidal thoughts and depression. God is going to do everything that he promised, and he is going to be faithful to us, but we have got to be faithful to him. And there are some requirements and there are some commands that God has placed on us, even when we are in a season of promise. As I stated previously, promise is not a time to get slacked or get slowful. This is the time to go after God just as hard, if not harder, as you did before while you were in a season of process. And we are going to get into what those requirements are and the importance of them in just a minute. So what is our requirements in promise? Prayer, persistence, and poise. So what is prayer? Let's talk about what prayer is. Prayer is your conversation or dialogue with God. Remember, prayer is not a monologue. That does not mean you go and you start talking off a list of things that you want. God is not a genie. You do not rub him or go come to him when you want something. That is not how that works, and he just grants your wishes. That's not how that works. Prayer is a conversation with God. It is a way for you to stay connected to God. It is a way for you to converse with God. God is still a true and living God, and you would talk to him just like you would anybody else, but with respect and reverence, of course. But it is a conversation. That means that you talk, but you do not monopolize the conversation. You have to have a moment where you are quiet and you are still, where you can hear what God is saying unto you. So what does God say about prayer in the Bible? We're going to go to Luke 18, the first verse. I'm going to give you just a second to get there. And he spake a parable unto them to this end, that men ought always to pray and not to faint. So this is where Jesus is giving us the command that we are to always pray, no matter what season we are in. Don't stop praying. Praying is where your power comes from. It's where your connection with God comes from. It is hard to maintain a healthy relationship with someone if you do not communicate with them. So prayer is very important in our Christian living, and it is also a requirement in our promise. Just because you saw him day and night in process does not mean you don't have to do that in promise. You have to go after God just as hard, if not harder, in promise. And we're going to get into why in just a second. Your prayer has power. Prophet Bell tells us all the time, no prayer, no power. Little prayer, little power. Much prayer, much power. So it is very important that we not only, make a habit of praying, but continue our habit of praying. It is hard to come in between somebody when you are really connected, and you are only really connected when you have that communication with someone. Just because you're in promise, I need you to remember this, does not mean that you will not have problems. Everything is not going to be all rainbow, sunshine, and lollipops. So we still have to continue to pray. We have to continue to seek God. And we're going to get into the importance of seeking God in just a minute. But Jesus commands us, men are to always pray and to faint not. It doesn't matter what season in your life you are in, you are to always pray. The Bible tells us to pray without ceasing, for this is the will of God concerning us. So we need to continue to pray. We need to continue to seek God and be everything that he calls us to be. So what is the next thing that is required of us? Persistence. Persistent is continuing firmly in a course of action in spite of difficulty or opposition. How many of us know that the devil does not only try to get in with delays and denials and not denials, delays and distance, but he can also come in during promise and try to get you to slack. That is not what this time is for. He'll be like, you got what you wanted. You don't really have to pray as hard as you used to. You don't have to do the things that you used to do because you got, what God said. You good now. But that is not how that works. We have to continue to seek God just as hard, if not harder, as we did as we were in process. So what does God say about that? In Jeremiah 29:13, and I'll give you a minute to flip there real quick. We're going to be doing quite a bit of flipping, but it is definitely for your benefit. Try to get everything that God has given me to you. So Jeremiah 29:13 says, and ye shall seek me and find me when ye shall search for me with all your heart. So just to back up a little bit, everybody knows, it's a familiar scripture, Jeremiah 29, the 10th and 11th verse. For another thoughts that I have towards you, thoughts of good and not to evil, God, to bring you to an expected end. And God does have an expected end. He has a promise for us, but we have to continue to seek him and seek him with our whole heart, and we will find him. Just as you went hard for God in process, you have to go just as hard, if not harder, for him in promise. So promise is not the time to slack. And if you need an example, look at the children of Israel. God did exactly what he said he would do. He delivered them from their bondage. He brought them in a land flowing with milk and honey. He did just what he said he would do. But the children of Israel got slacked, and they stopped seeking God, and they stopped reverencing God, and they stopped remembering God, and they started serving other gods and other things. And so we just need to take an example that just because God gave us our promise does not mean that that is the end all be all. We still have a life to live. We still have a light to be. And we still have to do everything that he requires of us and to be a good steward over what he has given us. How many know that if we are faithful in the things that he has given us, he will continue to give us more things to be faithful in? So let's show ourselves good stewards. And part of being a good steward is continuing to seek God. And how many know that new levels bring new devils? And so that means that God did not process you just because once you get to promise, it'll be a piece of cake. No, he wouldn't have processed you if it was going to be a piece of cake. Process is where you find your purpose. Process is where you get that character development or that poise, which we're about to get into in just a minute. So we just have to remember that just because there are new levels, there are still new devils, and we have to continue to seek God to be able to stand against the wiles of the devil so that he can flee from us and not us fleeing from him. So we are also required to have poise. So what is poise? It's to hold or carry in a certain way your humbleness. So God is giving you your promise, and God is doing all these things that he said he would do. But this is not a time for you to forget your character development. This is not for you to get all high and mighty and ride on your high horse. This is not that time. God is a God that giveth, and he is also a God that taketh away. So if you are not a good steward of what he is giving you, if you are not showing poise, if you are not showing good reputation or good character, God can just as easily take it away from you as he gave it to you. So what does this mean from a biblical standpoint? We're going to go to Proverbs, the 22nd chapter, the 1st through the 4th verse, and I'm going to give you just a second to get there. And it reads, a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. The rich and poor meet together. The Lord is the maker of them all. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches, honor, and life. So all those riches and everything and all those promises God is giving you is going to mean nothing if you forget your character. If you forget who God created you to be, it'll mean nothing to him. What is riches without a good reputation? What is riches without favor in the Lord's sight? So it is very important that we remember our humbleness and who God created us to be in the process, that we remember our process and we remember where God has brought us from so that we can have compassion and have all these other things for people, because we were in similar situation and God brought us. Who wants to serve a God who is a God of people who are high and mighty and who don't know how to love and who don't know how to speak and who don't know how to show love? Even with all the riches, that means nothing if you have a bad reputation, if you don't have the Lord's favor. So what is God commanding us to do in our poise? We're gonna read that in Colossians, the 3rd chapter, starting at the 12th verse, and I'm gonna give you a minute to get there. And it reads, put on therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercy, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long suffering. So basically what it is you are God's chosen. And with that title comes responsibilities, including how you carry yourself and how you carry this promise that God has given you. This does not mean that you get to be all high and mighty and you get to look down on people and skin your nose up at people and stop speaking just because God promised you and you're doing so well now and you're healed and you're delivered and you have all this financial freedom. That does not mean you get to look down on. There's a reason why God sent you through the process, and it was for that character development so that you will learn the things. The people don't want to hear anything from people that haven't been through anything. So if you know that God brought you from having a little to having much, you can be able to help somebody else. Look, I was where you were. I do not skin my nose down at you. I do not judge you because I was there and God brought me to this place. And just as he did it for me, he is able to do it for you. And that is our job and promise, to be a light, to show that character development, to show what God has done for us, and to be the people and to have the character God has called us to have. Humility and fear of the Lord leads to riches, honor, and long life. So God can still bless you And God can do all these things. And if you have that humility, and if you have that humbleness, and if you are a good steward of what God has given you, he knows that he can trust you with even more. So how does all of this apply to me? How can I implement all of this in my life? So I just want you to remember just some very important things. God is going to fulfill his promise. He is going to restore us. But it is very important that you remember and be cognizant of the posture of your heart while you are in promise. This is not a time to get slack. This is not a time to get slowful. This is the time to really go after God even harder than you went before, because we know new levels bring new levels. We have to pray and increase our prayer life and continue to maintain our prayer life. Do not, under no circumstances, do you stop praying. And how do we not stop praying? We carve out time, even more extra time, to ensure our commitment to our prayer life. That means continuing to get rid of distractions and continuing to just kind of set aside time, even in the beginning of our day and even at night, to watch and to pray morning and night, not when it's convenient for us, but we have got to set out time. The devil will try to use this new position to drive you away from God. Know his tactics. Remember his tactics from last week so that you may be able to counter and to stand against him. Persistence. How do you show persistence? Continuing to go after God with everything you got, even with more responsibilities now that you have gotten what God has promised you. You have got to make some sacrifices. Yes, you have more responsibilities, but this does not mean this is the time that you get slacked or you just put everything else and put what God has God has promised you and God has given you above him. Do not make your promise your idol. God is still your God. He is the God that giveth and he is the God that take away. So be consistent and persistent in your pursuit of God, in your seeking God, because without God, you will not be able to stand and you will not be able to handle the things that he has given you. Poise. Remember where you came from. Remember the process and remember that character development. Remember that God will humble you, but it is best that you humble yourself because you do not want him to do it. You do not want God to humble you. It is not nice. You want to just go ahead, get in a place where you can just humble yourself, down, because you don't want God's hand to humble you. But most importantly, wear this new position of promise well, because not only are people watching you, so is your God. How you handle this will determine how God handles you and the next thing that he has for you. So just want you to put into practice to start carving out time where you really seeking God and where you are really praying to God and where you are really, trying to continue to work on your character development and being all that God calls you to be. Make it a hard boundary for you that you're going to set out this amount of time in the day and at night. And this is the time where I'm going to seek God, where I'm going to pray, and where I'm going to continue to work on my character development. I'm going to seek God and what he says to me and how he wants to continue to make me and to mold me. And under no circumstance is anyone or me to violate this hard boundary. That means before I take care of anything and everybody else, yes, you have responsibilities, and God knows you have responsibilities, but God, this must be our priority, not our promise. God is our priority and not our promise. And once we have God and we be kingdom minded and we do everything that God says and be everything that God has called us to be, he'll add everything else to us. And he'll also take us from faith, to glory, meaning he still has more in store for us. But we have to be careful how we handle the promise, because it will determine how God handles us and the next thing that he has for us. But that is all that I have for you guys on tonight. Please be sure to join us for our Saturday morning prayer and also Sunday morning service. And I just thank you and just hope that you have gotten something out of what I said, and just pray that God continues to strengthen me. And I'll pray for you. God bless each and every one of you. And we love you.